Hey everybody, welcome back to Battle Ready Inc. So today we're doing a BT14 tier list. I know some people don't like tier lists. If you're one of those people, you probably shouldn't click on the video. But if you do and you're just want to know my insight, then stick around. Now I haven't done one of these in quite some time, so bear with me. I'm a bit rusty on making tier lists, so I'm going to do my best. There might be a little bit of bias there, but if you ever disagree with something, definitely put it in the comment section and just voice your argument. I mean, I'm happy to change my opinion if there is a valid reason to do so. Also, check out our Etsy page, link in the description. There you can find all of the memory markers that we've ever featured on the channel in the past, as well as tons of new Digimon merch. Lots of great stuff to check out there. Just an example, we got a cute little Tentamon acrylic. What is this? Is it a marker or just like
a marker?
It could be a fridge magnet.
A magnet.
Yeah.
It could be a hair tie. It could be a bookmark. Maybe too thin for a bookmark. It could be a divider for card sleeves.
For like bulk and stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so I got the tier list pulled up for you guys. Now, this is not my own creation. This is took this from a Devi tier list. They're the ones that made it. I just added in a holy wave. If there's anything that doesn't get put on the list that you think does actually deserve a serious spot on the list, please let me know so we can get that pinned in the comics for other people. So I'm just going to go pretty much in order here with what we have. So Alphamon right out the gate here. Alphamon got a lot of more support here recently. It does okay in certain formats. Just kind of really depends on the pilot. It's also just not overly popular right now. It was like super popular right when it got that new support, the new Dora Gray, but it's kind of fallen off a little bit. I think somewhere in 1.5 is pretty solid for it. Depending on how the deck is built, it can still be a pretty powerhouse card. Powerhouse deck in general. The combos they can get off. It takes a lot longer to build up than anything else. Probably like low end of 1.5 is where it's going to end up. Next, we got the new Angel deck from BT14. Now, we do have the limit to Geo Greymon. So in JP meta, this deck just absolutely decimated and did really, really well for quite some time until EX5 came out. But this time around, there's no Geo Greymon, and that was definitely a very, very powerful card for the deck, in addition to the Angemon. So will the deck still be as good? I do think it will still be extremely good. Just with the playtesting and stuff so far, this deck just seems so wild. Like, the control element is phenomenal with all the DP minusing on the opponent stuff, the recovery, as well as like the multiple security checks like the Seraphimon can get and things like that. I think it's a very, very strong card, or strong deck in general. Next, we got Arashidramon Superior Mode. This deck still throwing it down in the JP meta still today. So I think it's definitely still a solid deck. It gets its tops here and there. I think it's like maybe bottom of 1, but I think I'm just going to throw it here in the top of 1.5. I feel pretty comfortable with that. And like I said, top of 1.5, bottom of 1. Next we got, this is Bagramon here. Unfortunately, Bagramon just hasn't really done too much. It's got some neat tricks it can do. I'm probably just going to throw it down here in Gimmick. It's a fun deck. It's got some really neat gimmicky things it can do. It's good enough to make the list, I think. But yeah, not good enough to be like super competitive in regionals and things like that. Next, we got Beelzemon here. Deck is still extremely good. Yes, it got the limit on the Impmon, which slowed its mills down just a tiny bit, but I still think the deck is very, very strong. Super solid deck. Still gets tops in JP, even after all these updates and new strategies that have come out for other decks as well. But I think I'm just going to throw it here in tier 2. It is a gimmicky deck, right? If your mills are just atrocious, then the deck really kind of doesn't do anything. But as long as your mills are decent and average, the deck can perform well. If your mills are, ungodly, then yeah, you could definitely punch up into this upper tier of decks for sure. Next, we got Belphemon here. The deck, for a time, was just absolutely killing it in the English format. Just really, really just stomping everyone. And then it just kind of died off. I'm not really sure what's up with that. I still think it's pretty solid, though. It can be difficult to out. I'm just going to throw it down here in kind of like the middle of 1.5 for now. Definitely feels better than Alphamon. It does take some time to set up, but like once you get to that point where you're like, you get your pieces in rotation, like it's really difficult to deal with. Next, we got Black War Greymon X. This deck, honestly, every time I need to be like super competitive, this is my go-to deck. Black War Greymon X. Up till BT14 at least, was definitely my go-to. I think it's extremely good. It still gets tons of tops all the time. I think, and it's got more support now with the Agumon, as well as you can even throw in the new War Greymon if you wanted to with it. But I think the control element, as well as just it's hard to remove. It's great control. It's got the blocker, the redirect kind of stuff going on there. It can pop Digimon on the opponent's side of the field. It can go for solid security checks with no worries. Yeah, I'm going to throw it up here in tier 1. I still think this deck is super solid even now. I mean, it's Agumon. They get enough support. They should be relevant at all times, I think, with the amount of support it gets. Next, we got Bloom. I think Bloom has been kind of under the radar right now. A lot of people have just kind of fallen off of the deck. Now, granted, the dedicated green players out there that have been playing this deck are still sticking with it. Got some great support in this set. The Palmon is just absolutely incredible for the deck. Just tons of great stuff that the deck got even more support for it. I think it's super solid. Honestly, I would even possibly put it higher than a Reshigramon, but maybe not. Right next to it, I think just a bit. Just because this has proven itself in getting tops recently, English and JP format, but Bloom still hasn't really. But that could also be just because of a limited number of people willing to pilot it and take it to regionals and stuff to actually see it. But I think that it's still got great potential. It can just do some incredible turns. It just depends on what the format looks like. If it hard counters Bloom, then you won't see it. But if there's not any hard counters floating around the meta, then Bloom definitely is in a great position. Next, we got Blue Flare, always getting support, it seems, directly or indirectly, with the Greymons that come out and stuff like that. I think this is still pretty solid. Some people think it's like arguably in tier 1. I don't know if I can quite get onto that like bandwagon. It does have a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool new support and things like that. But I still think like the relative top end of it is still about the same. And honestly, as long as like decks like Black War Greymon X are still in rotation, I don't think it can like really argue standing on in tier 1. Too many decks right now that are going to be in tier 1 can counter this deck. So I'm just going to throw it up here in the top of 1.5 as well. Chaos Dramon, Machine Dramon decks are still super solid. Their performance comes and goes. Sometimes they'll be like really, really popular, and then other times just absolutely nothing. I feel like a lot of Machine Dramon players are also Dorbigmon players, and Dorbigmon does have like higher performance records for it, if that's a good way to look at it. So Machine Dramon still does solid, but can't always keep up. I would put it up here above Alphamon though, but the Belphemon has definitely shown way more performance than Machine Dramon. It's just when they hit the outs for this deck, it hurts so bad that they can never recover. Like you hit a Chaos Degrade, you pretty much just lose the game right there because you just lost so much resources and everything like that, so much momentum. Next, we got Craniumon here. Does have some cool support and stuff like that. Really haven't seen it do too much. I'm probably just going to throw it here in tier 2. Just blocker decks, sometimes they're okay, sometimes they're not. Craniumon's a great card, really cool stuff. It's cool in Royal Knights as well. But on its own, I don't think it's too phenomenal. Next, we got D-Brigade here with all the new Digipolice support that we have. The entire new Evo line for the deck, new Mega, all of it. Even pseudo new Tamer, because now they got the Satsuki with the Numemon that are teched into these decks because they are Digipolice as well, and they actually synergize with the new cards a whole lot. There's just a whole lot of life breathed back into this deck. And honestly, this might be one of those bias moments I was talking about earlier, but I'm going to throw it up here into tier 1. Its ability to flood the field is insane, as well as with the new inheritables that give it protection. Removing it off field is actually extremely difficult. Cards like Chaos Brigade that could used to just answer any Digimon in the game are now, they can struggle against this because it has protection from being, removed from the field entirely. So yeah, I think I'm going to throw it up in here into tier 1. Next we have, what is this? Is this Proxy or Dark Knight? Kind of hard to tell there. Let's see if Proxy's on the list anywhere else. Also, sometimes I get the arts mixed up. I think this is Proxymon. Oh, no, there's Proxymon. So, yeah, this is Dark Knight then. Okay. Yeah, they're similar for sure. Dark Knightmon, I'll throw it down here. Rogue. Honestly, I kind of want to throw it in Gimmick even. I'll leave it in Rogue. Rogue's fine. It's got some neat tricks. It can do some stuff. It's got, good floaters as well. Is that enough necessarily these days? Not entirely. A lot of the new decks that are out can really hard answer this, and I really don't think this deck here has a chance at ever beating any of these tier 1 decks. So I'm going to throw it down there. Next we got what is this guy? He's in the mill deck that you just mill your opponent out like crazy. I mean, it is definitely a gimmick, but it's a decent gimmick, so I don't want to just throw it in the gimmick tier. Actually, I'm going to throw it up here into tier 2. I would actually probably put it at the top of tier 2. You're relying on this one strategy, and if the opponent has enough gas and can just, run over you before you have a chance to put up what you need, I think it's just not going to perform as well. So I'm going to throw it there. I can't for the life of me remember his name. Diaboromon Ace. I know a lot of people are looking for this card right now. Honestly, this is one of the more unknowns for me. Diaboromon's always been one of those decks that it's just sometimes it is just impossible to deal with. All those, all those copies that it has, all those tokens, super difficult to deal with. And now the Ace here, in it being run in it as well. Ace, stuff can be good, sometimes not. I think in this case, this is a pretty solid include. I think I'm going to throw it up in here with Machinedramon. Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable putting it next to Machinedramon and Chaosdramon. Next, we got Dorbic, which we already talked about earlier. I feel like a lot of the players that, if they're not playing Machinedramon, then they're probably playing Dorbic. Just it's very similar-isk playstyles. It's very OTK. I mean, I've seen this deck literally win on turn 2, on its turn 2, I think going second. So just absurd. I can't even fathom it sometimes how this deck just does what it does so stinking well. So I'm actually going to probably throw it pretty high up in here. It's nicknamed Door Brickmon for a reason, because if it breaks, you just hard lose. But also, I like literally often the opponent can't set up enough to deal with it fast enough. So I'm going to throw it there. Next, we got Leopardmon, like a Leopardmon pure deck here. It's neat. It can flood the field pretty well. It can get tons of attacks off, but depending on the matchup you're against, that can be, still a hard lose. Depending on, it's like really susceptible to options. It's susceptible to like big blocker decks, that can put up a really like massive defense. So I'm gonna just throw it down here into Rogue. There's just too many outs in the format that can deal with it. Next, we got Gallantmon here. Gallantmon, I love Gallantmon so much, and I feel like this deck should be good. With all the stuff it has, like, I love the X antibody. You're trashing so much security, you barely have to do any security checks, and, like, literally, you can just go with, Crimson mode for a game. Just swing with Crimson mode and trash all your opponent's security and just hit face. But yet it just doesn't perform. I don't understand. I'm going to still throw it up in here into tier 2, though. I want to throw it up here with Beelzemon. I think these two almost kind of go together anyways. So I'm totally okay with putting them side by side. Next, we got Eosmon here. It did get the new Morphomon promo, but is that enough to like really make this deck super good or, decently good? I don't think so. It is super gimmicky. I'm definitely going to throw it down in here. I'll put it one step above Bagra, at least. But it is very much a hardcore gimmick deck that sometimes it can pay off, but usually not. Next, we got Examon here. Examon's still one of those decks that just sometimes can be just a pain. No one's really playing it anymore. It was extremely high rarity kind of a deck, so no one really wanted to touch it, or a lot of people couldn't afford to touch it. Now, I do think it's better than the ones we have here in Rogue tier. I would feel pretty comfortable putting it down into tier 2, though. It can do a lot. Its control element can be extremely difficult for some decks to deal with, but other decks can just deal with it super easily. So it just kind of depends on what the matchup is, on where it's going to end up falling. I don't know if it can necessarily compete with some of these other decks, especially the tier 1s as well as like the 1.5s, the upper end of 1.5s. I think it's going to struggle against a lot of those decks. Fenrir Lugomon. Oh my god. If you watched our video earlier this week talking about all the new decks for BT14, yeah, absolutely astonished what this deck can do. Literally on turn 2, you can OTK your opponent. You do need basically Black Gatomon, though, with the rush to do it. But yes, this deck can OTK on turn 2. And I think that absolutely deserves a spot up here in the 1.5 or maybe even bottom of tier 1. I think I want to do it. Now, this might be another biased, just a little bit, but it needs its pieces. It has to see its pieces that do its incredible combos. But literally, it's just as soon as it sees its pieces, it just wins. Assuming it doesn't, of course, hit into like a security bomb or something like that. The deck just absolutely crushes. You know what? Maybe I'll put it in 1.5. The top, very, very top of 1.5. Very, very hard to choose. Next, we got the new Goldramon here. Goldramon. Really cool card. Creating those tokens. Those tokens are super strong. Getting the recovery off of it as well. Now, as a whole deck, though, I don't know if I want to exactly, rely on just a single mega. Now, granted, you got 4 copies of it, but essentially a single mega from my deck to, really do its full power. So I think I'm going to throw it down here into Rogue. Definitely above these other two, but I think I want to put it in Rogue. It feels pretty safe. oh man, this is what the Z deck. This deck just hasn't really done anything. I'm just gonna throw it here into Gimmick. There's not really much to say. It's cool, but there's just not enough going on. It just doesn't do enough. Next, we got the Imperialdramon. This is the dark one, so the purple black or purple red one, where you need that trash setup, and getting that trash setup can be a pain, because only after you get your trash set up can you start to pop off, and because you literally have to have all those things. Unfortunately, yeah, I'm gonna have to throw it down here into Gimmick. This deck just has not done well. It's in a rough spot. It's so cool, and when you do get that setup, then yeah, you can start to really play and have a good game. But if you just lose by turn 3 because you have no way to answer any of your opponent's stuff, and they can just like rookie rush you down relatively easily, yeah, I just gonna have to throw it in Gimmick, unfortunately. Next, we got Edamon here with the new Sukamon support. Sukamon looking pretty solid. You see your stuff turn to poop enough, and yeah, you'll start to respect this deck. It's pretty cool. There's lots of cool stuff that it can do. It's got nice flexibility for multiple strategies that you can do with it, which instantly, in my mind, makes it a pretty solid deck, that having that flexibility there. So like, it definitely feels like high end of Rogue, maybe towards the tail end of Tier 2. I don't mind putting it in the tail end of Tier 2. That feels pretty alright. Leomon. Honestly, kind of surprised to see a Leomon on this list, but you know what? We'll go ahead and throw it in here. I'll probably throw it here into Rogue tier. It's got some neat stuff. It's got the recovery, the blocker, the memory gain, the draws. It's got some decent stuff there, but the second your opponent puts out anything too big, especially a big blocker or something like that, it just the deck just dies. It just doesn't have enough to handle it at that point. Lord Nightmon. Now, we did get that new Nightmon promo, which is great, because now there's 2 Nightmons that you can run for your level 5s, which I'm ecstatic for. That's really, really nice. So granted, one card isn't going to make a huge difference here, but I feel like this deck has got some good potential to be good again. I've been looking at it and thinking about it more and more recently, just because it's been so long, and this deck was so oppressive. If you play during this format, this deck was insanely oppressive. Like, it was one of the most hated formats that I can ever remember in this game. Now, a lot of people now that are still playing this game didn't play during this format, so they don't know. So they can't really put good judgment on it, on the argument. But yeah, I mean, this was up here with like Blue Hybrid in terms of arguments on like how absurdly powerful this was by comparison to everything else in the format. And yes, I think it's got some great potential here. If you can attack twice with this, and its effects aren't once per turn, you can pop out multiple Digimon if they have Rush and things like that, like Bushi Agumon, and you have any sort of security attack bonus, like this deck can really, really mess you up. Now, unfortunately, it is untested, so I'm going to throw it down here into Rogue tier. I'll throw it in the top of Rogue tier. Feel fine with that. I think this deck has potential to make another resurgence, though, for sure. Next, we got Mastamon, which is kind of the... it's a more interesting version of security control, I guess you could kind of say. It does some neat things. It's got a lot of the same elements as security control. Not as much recovery, though. But there is some really nice things, some really cool techs. One of my friends at Locals, he plays this deck religiously and is always trying to improve it, and bouncing ideas off of me, and we go back and forth on how to what we think was a really good build for it. And yeah, I think this deck still has really, really solid potential. I'll throw it... Yeah, I mean, it kind of hard answers Chaos Dramon. I'll throw it right there, right above Chaos Dramon. Next, we got Mervamon. I'm assuming this is the Mervamon with the Crossheart engine, so it's like super rush heavy. You're in those option cards that give you a ton of memories, things like that, and you try to just blow your opponent out in one fell swoop once you get to that point. this deck has done great in the past, but not always. Oh my god, something fell and it scared the crap out of me. But yeah, not always. So I kind of want to put it down here, somewhere in here. I feel that feels pretty good right there. All right, next we got Metal Garurumon. Now with the purple cards, this deck is playable again. You know, we lost that the blue Garurumon, and the blue engine just basically died instantly. We are getting more support in EX5 with the new X antibodies that are stupid good. But right now, as it is, it's just okay. I don't think it's as good. Just because the colors, you can kind of brick a little bit. So you build for more of a purple engine, but you have to still use the blue X antibodies, which can cause a problem. Now, granted, a lot of this stuff goes off of names now. So you have that black box text. So that helps some. But yeah, if you say you open like Gabumon X and you have nothing, you have a purple egg. You can't Evo it there, so you gotta hard play it, which you might want to do anyway. But still, you can kind of brick on things like that just because you only draw the blues, or you say you draw the blue Garurumon X, but you don't have a blue target to Evo, and you don't have a purple Garurumon to Evo on top of. The deck can kind of just stall out because it's just kind of bricks awkwardly. So until it gets the EX5 support, I don't want to do anything too crazy with it. I do think it's still pretty solid, though. It's pretty fun. I'll throw it right here into middle of tier 2. I think it's better than these guys, but I don't think it's better than these. Next, we got Mirage Galgamon. This deck does on and off pretty well. I think I want to throw it up here into 1.5. Somewhere up in here. It's kind of like All Force. You get those really cool like OTK-ish plays. You can just do a ton of attacks, which is really, really cool. You do have to play it very carefully. Don't make mistakes. And you do need to see relatively, pretty decent pieces. I think the blue training cards will help this deck a ton. So I want to throw it up here into 1.5. And that, of course, has moved us off of our picks down here. So let me get this just a little bit higher. There we go. All right, next up is Proxymon, which we were on earlier. Gamamon is cool. Gamamon, the whole premise of Gamamon is really cool, where it's almost like armors, but not as powerful as armors. It's got all these different forms that do all these different things that can answer multiple situations. It's got the new Seriousmon and not Aristramon, but yeah, the Proxymon, the level 6 version, the purple one. I'm drawing a blank. Arcturusmon. That's cool. And if you can stick this guy, he can definitely be a problem. But if your opponent just has like basic kind of removal, it can definitely be a problem. So I'll throw it up into tier 2, just because there are certain issues where if the opponent answers like your stack, you kind of just fizzle out because you put so much effort into getting this guy out, and then once you do, if the opponent just clears it, it feels so bad. So I'll throw it up here next to Gallantmon. That feels right. Yeah, right next to Gallantmon. Red Hybrid next. Definitely want to put this in 1.5 somewhere. I think it has better performance than Machinedramon. Yeah, it feels about right here in this middle section. It's just, Tamer decks can be, difficult to handle depending on what is in the format. If your opponent is playing Black War Greymon in this Black War Greymon X deck that's popping Tamers, this deck can definitely have a bit of a problem there. As well as, blocking and redirecting and things like that. You just can't get your chip damage in, can be an issue. Next we got Rosemon, which this is my wife's deck actually that she's been playing a ton of, and it's got some great stuff. It got tons of new support in BT14, so I definitely think it's got more potential now. Unfortunately, it's another one of those decks that, like, if you don't get your solid combo off and you can't get into your burst mode, you just don't do anything. Like, you literally just pretty much hard lose if you can't get into your burst mode. Like, Rosemond can do a little bit on her own, but the difference between Rosemond and Rosemond burst mode is like night and day. Like, if you can't get into your burst mode, then the opponent just doesn't have to worry too much about what you're doing. So, it can be a bit of a struggle there. I'll throw it here into the middle of tier 2. This feels roughly about right. As long as you see your stuff, though, the deck is really good. It's just, it doesn't have, you have a limited number of Yoshinos and burst modes. Like, once you burn through like 2 burst modes, then the chances of seeing more than that in a game is pretty much non-existent. Like, you need to have 1 by the time you get your second burst mode out into rotation. Also, getting another Yoshino into play can be a problem to go into another burst mode. So you kind of need to build up a second stack that lets you play that Yoshino for free, or else if you're hard playing it for 4 play costs, then you're basically skipping every other turn to do stuff with it. Rust Tyrannomon Ace here coming into the format. Is it enough to bump Rust Tyrannomon up though? It's gotten consecutive support for ages. Just almost every set, they're like, hey, here's another Tyrannomon. Here's another Tyrannomon. Here's another Tyrannomon. It never gets like a whole new Evo line like all at once, it feels like, but it does steadily get support. Unfortunately, is that enough to really make the deck pop off? I don't quite think so. Time will tell on this. I'm willing to put it at the bottom of tier 2, though. Feels not as quite as limited as these rogue tier decks. It does have a lot to at least that it can offer that's new. Shine Greymon, just the bane of the beginning of the BT14 format there for a good minute. It did kind of start to fall off a little bit, but still consistently getting top 8s, top 16s, and things like that. So I think I want to still throw it up here into 1.0. It did have the limit on the Geo Gray that started with this set, which will definitely impact it. Like, that is a huge hit, not necessarily just for the ability to play your Marcuses for free out of security. Nice effect, absolutely. But it was one of the Geo Greymon named targets. So all your Rise Greymon that want to Evo on top of your Geo Greymons, you did just lose 3 copies of Geo Greymon. Now, there are other Geo Greymons that exist in the game. They don't have as good as like inheritables and things like that. So losing that Geo Greymon definitely will hurt it some. But we have the training cards now, so you can use your training cards to get into your good pieces, and then as soon as you see your combo, you have your training cards, you just pop off instantly using your training cards. So reducing Evo costs and things like that. So I still think this deck is just as good, even with the hit there, because of the new introduction of the training cards. Next we got Monzaemon here, which is pretty cool. Deck, not crazy good though, right? I think it's a cool, neat premise. I'm willing to throw it up here somewhere into rogue tier, kind of like the Guldramon here. Similar kind of vibes. It's cool. It's got some neat things that it can do, but is it enough to really punch into the tiers of all this stuff up here? Not quite sure. Titamon here, little surprised to see it on the list. It doesn't overly do a whole lot. I know some people every once in a while they get really excited for this deck, and they talk about all these neat things it can do, but I've just never seen it actually do those things that people talk about that it can do. I don't know if it just bricks too bad or what the issue is, but the deck just never seems to perform very well at all. I'll throw it up here. I'll throw it up at the top of Rogue, like up there with that Lord Knight. Lord Knight is just so untested, so I'm willing to at least throw the Titamon up there. Ulforce. Ulforce is just as good as it's been. I don't know what else to say there. It's been winning, Evo Cups and things like that. Not really much has changed with it. It is a very piece reliant deck. You really need to see your arenas and things like that. But when you do, it's so hard to stop it. I feel like it's up here right next to Dorbeckmon. Like they have similar vibes. If you see enough pieces, decent amount of pieces early, you can just crush your opponent with this. Like it's got great control, as well as great offense for sure. So yeah, we'll throw it right up in there in the higher end of 1.5. War Greymon got that new secret rare in BT14, which I feel like is one of the best War Greymons ever printed. Like they took all the most busted parts of War Greymon and then just of multiple different War Greymons that have been made, and they threw it all into one War Greymon. Like I was talking about earlier, like you can literally just add this card into the Black War Greymon X deck as, just an extra support card as a 1 or 2 of, and you still have your other Black War Greymon stuff in that deck, and this is just a great support. Now you can also just run it as a pure War Greymon deck, kind of like an OTK style deck, War Greymon X kind of deck, like that, and I think that's still solid. So just like Black War Greymon X, I feel like it's just as good. Like both of these decks are just as good. I will leave Black War Greymon X a smidge higher though, because of the defensive capabilities of this deck. This deck doesn't have those defensive capabilities, but the Black War Greymon X can totally take the War Greymon and incorporate its what it does. I don't think it quite works in reverse though. Like if you have a War Greymon X, and then you just toss in a Black War Greymon X or 2, and not as quite as strong. I think it only works in the reverse. You want to add the War Greymon to a Black War Greymon X heavy deck. Hopefully that made sense. That's just my 2 cents on that. Next we got Shoutmon Cross 7. Similar to the Merva deck. Unfortunately, I think the Merva deck just has more consistent tops, at least during its time of doing well. Both of these decks have been played less and less and less. So I'll throw it down here somewhere. Oh, goodness. I think that's okay. Part of me wants to put it lower, but at the same time, not really. So yeah, I mean, this deck can still do well. You hit enough Tamers in security, and they just keep playing free Digimon that can just get free checks on you on the following turn because they don't have the summoning sickness anymore, and then they just save themselves, and then they just throw out. They just cross Digivolve there and just play out a free body that has rush, and they just swing more. This cross decks can be a super pain to deal with. Just they can be a little bit RNG heavy is all. Next we got Royal Knights here, which has done pretty solid in this format, the BT13 format. So I think it will still carry through just as pretty as solid as it has been. I'm willing to throw it up here into tier 1 though, right there with the Rise Greymon. I think these two decks have gone back and forth on who was the dominant one. So I'll keep them together. Next we got Zudomon here. Got some cool stuff, some really neat control stuff. That Gomamon is probably one of the best rookies we've seen printed in ages. For just literally you can throw it to any blue deck. Any blue deck you ever make, you can just throw that Gomamon in there, and it's instantly good. Just instantly becomes unblockable that your opponent just hard loses because it just attacks directly in the final throws of the game. And you're like, okay, I'm going to put out 2 blockers, and you have a Gomamon that you're promoting at a raising area. I can't do anything about that. You just win. So granted, that's a lot of, parts onto Gomamon specifically there. The rest of the deck, though, it's okay. It's got some great control stuff. You can run, Hexablau in the deck. You can run the Plesiomon in the deck. You can run a Zulongmon in the deck. A Zulongmon against D Brigade is, I feel like that's just game over. And then you just go Blitz Omnimon for game. So, depending on the matchup, this deck could be really, really good. But I don't know if it's quite enough, is the thing. Because you basically have to choose, what do you want to do. Do you want to go really control heavy on the top end, or do you want to go really offensive on the top end? And it can be a struggle if you can't do both. So, and that's like some of these other like tier 1 decks, is when they get into their megas, their top end, they do both. They are offense like crazy and defensive like crazy, except for maybe Shine Greymon. But if they're going to Shine Greymon burst mode, I feel like they just pretty much immediately win when they hit that step. So I'll throw it down here into bottom of 1.5. I think this deck has some good potential. It's got some really powerful tools. So just time will tell on where this deck falls. And then lastly, we got Security Control, everybody's favorite deck. Favorite deck to hate? Absolutely. This deck just always seems to crop up every once in a while. I mean, it is one of my favorite decks to play. Unfortunately for a lot of people. Now, where does it fall? It can definitely struggle against all those tier 1 decks, right? Like the Angemon deck, it can, keep up with enough recovery, and then, punching through and things like that. And it's got, it can build back up into megas super easily, multiple times, one after another. Black War Greymon X can use like cards like Yuya and things like that and just be unaffected. War Greymon, kind of similar there. It can use certain tools to make itself, unkillable, and then swing for a ton of security checks. D Brigade gets so many bodies on field that if you don't have enough wide board removal, which a lot of people have not been running a lot of high wide board removal in SetCon, so it can struggle there. Rise Greymon, basically until they're ready to pop off, you cannot interact with their board. Like, they'll just sit in raising area digging for like tamers and things like that, and by the time they're ready to go, you have to just absolutely pray you have something in security that can deal with those threats. But even then, often they'll just bounce right back and do it again. So yeah, that's a struggle. Same with the Royal Knights. When Royal Knights is ready to pop off and punish you, there's just so much on field that you just cannot answer it all. You can't use wide board removal on it because they're all megas. And your single target just is not enough to deal with the amount of bodies that flood the field. So I don't think it can beat any of those tier 1 decks as reliably. So I think I'm just going to put it up here into tier 1.5. I'll put it above these other guys because it can answer all these other ones, like these big stack decks like Ulforce and Dorbic. Like, you just need to answer these decks like one time, that answer their mega one time, and they struggle to go into a second stack quickly, and as long as they can't do it quickly, SetCon can just recover back and then just get themselves right back into another position to handle another big stack. So yeah, Fenrir Lugomon though, like if they pop off and they get enough bodies on field, they can be difficult to answer. You either answer the single mega, or you answer that field full of level 4s that they have out on there, which they can immediately just start going right back up into another mega after that. So if you answer the mega, then one of the other level 4s is just going to turn into a mega on the following turn, and if you answer the little ones, then Fenrir Lugomon's just going to play them all right back out again. So yeah. It can definitely struggle here. I haven't seen this matchup played against each other just yet. I'm very curious to kind of see how that goes. But that is going to do it. I know, super long video here. Did at least keep it well under an hour this time around, so that's good. Again, if you have any discrepancies that you don't agree with, definitely put it in a complete thought. don't just rage in the comments or anything like that. And again, I am very rusty on this. Some of these decks, like I said, I have not seen in action. A little rusty into the format. Hopefully I got everything new that's relevant on this list. If I missed anything, let me know, please.